Atomic bomb. It's operational. They intend to use it.
What type is it?
I don't know. I don't know what type. I've never seen it before.
But didn't you see a series number?
No numbers. Just some letters on one of the fins. Greek letters. Alpha
And Omega. Doomsday bomb.
Oh, God.
What a lovely souvenir from the 20th century.
Do you expect me to talk?
Hello and welcome to episode 195 of Do You Expect Us to Talk? I'm your host Becca, and as always joined by my fellow co-hosts Chris and Dave, and also our special guest for this series, Charlie Brigden.
Hey.
Good evening.
Hey.
Jazz hands. Chris, say hello.
Oh, hello. Sorry.
Yeah. Sorry.
So I was doing
doing
jazz hands.
He's
Sorry.
doing jazz hands.
I realised that no one could see me. So
Are jazz hands what you do when you're reading jazz mags? Right. We should be interrupting that because I think there's a moth flying across my screen.
There's
And the cat's got interested, so the cat is now right by my keyboard having a fucking swing at the screen.
Is your cat doing jazz paws?
Jazz paws? I don't know.
To try and catch the moth?
Can you get magazines full of... Hang on. No.
Then he's the centrefold.
Yeah. Weird.
Whatever you do, don't rub that belly. Anyway, moving on. So, tonight we are discussing Beneath the Planet of the Apes, starring not-Charlton Heston, James Franciscus, Kim Hunter, Morris Evans, Linda Harrison, Paul Richards, Victor Bonner, James Gregory, and Charlton Heston. With the score by Leonard Rosenman, with the script by Paul Dean of Goldfinger fame, and Walt Abrahams, and of course based on the novel by Pierre Boulle, whose name I still can't pronounce, directed by Ted Post, and released in 1970.
What else do we want to say about this? Ted Post brought in to sort of take over from Schaffner, is it?
Schaffner, yeah.
Looking at his filmography, the thing that stood out was he's worked with Clint Eastwood a few times, and that includes a few westerns, but it also
all the westerns.
It also includes not any other ones we're going to cover, but Magnum Force, which is the second Dirty Harry film.
and possibly the best as well.
Arguably. I've only seen the first one, and Dirty Harry's on the list. We're going to cover Dirty Harry.
Yeah, I think those two
and I'll
for me
be
are
kind
probably
of
the
the
faves.
seen the first one. That's all.
I think it's good, but the first one I think is because it's so different.
It's a Stone Cold classic.
It's not a uniform view, but I have heard people say, "Oh, I prefer Magnum Force."
It's more action heavy, I think. Magnum Force. I think that's probably why. But again, it's got like a really sort of cool plot to it as well, like cool concept. You got like vigilante, like mysterious police bikers doing vigilante hits. So it's kind of like so there's that aesthetic to it as well.
And yeah, he didn't actually make that many films. He made about, what am I looking at? About 13 here, which doesn't sound too bad, but we're not talking about an auteur here. We're talking about somebody who's just works in a range of things. So he did a lot of TV films, which I've not counted in that number. And then he did an awful lot of television shows, like Perry Mason's on there. Columbo is on there. The Twilight Zone is on there. Rawhide. So a decent sort of jobbing worker, basically, who will have been about early 50s when he made this. Leonard Rosenman came in as cinematographer for this. First thing, couple of things. Sorry, what did I say?
You said cinematographer.
No, I meant composer. I'm really sorry. He stands out for two things. He stands out for the Argos Christmas catalogue score that is Star Trek 4.
Argos Christmas catalogue.
He also did the animated Lord of the Rings film, and Barry Lyndon.
That's where I've heard that name before.
Barry Lyndon, the Stanley Kubrick film. Charlie will know him from other stuff, I'm sure, but that's what stands out to me. And then Milton Krasner came in as cinematographer. I'm sorry, he did win. He doesn't have 4 Academy Awards like the guy from last week, but he has 1 for 3 Coins in the Fountain.
Just to point out, Dave, Leonard Rossman also did RoboCop 2, which we have covered on the show.
Of course.
Yeah, let's not talk about that.
The less about that, the better.
Well, he was taken over from Basil Polideris, which is a tough ask.
Big shoes to fill.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Krasner also did the 7-Year Itch, and obviously that iconic scene of the great.
That's the
iconic film.
billowing skirt or
Indeed.
billowing dress that Marilyn Monroe, most famous shot of her film career, anyway. Yeah. So I don't, but I'm not actually sure I've seen the film, if I'm honest.
It's one of the things you might have seen that iconic shot or that particular image, but yeah, if you don't know, very often you might have just seen that image rather than the film.
Just looking at Krasner's filmography, because the few I could name were off the top of my head, but I'm actually looking at his filmography now, and there's several that stand out. He had a very, very good career by the look of it, although this is his final film. He was in his mid-60s around this time. One of the ones that stands out here is An Affair to Remember, the Cary Grant film that is very heavily referenced in Sleepless in Seattle. So he shot that. I'm not suggesting that's amongst the best films. It's just very well known amongst people who might be listening to this.
All About Eve stands out as well.
All About Eve, yeah. And I'm glancing. There's just so much here. There's so much here. And he worked in all genres as well. The Invisible Man Returns. And he basically worked from 1933 to 1970. So he's from early talkies right up to sort of these sort of 70s counterculture films.
There you go. He also did the Howard Hawks company Monkey Business.
Which is good. Monkey Business is good. It really is.
Monkey Tennis.
Monkey tennis.
Yeah, Monkey Tennis. It's very cheap. You can film it in the inner cities, along with Inner City Sumo. So yeah, that's really also I wanted to say about the sort of supporting crew. It's a complete change from last week. The only other thing I would say is obviously we've got a different leading man this week, sort of. Continuity Charlton Heston. Didn't live to a massive age. This guy died at 57 in 1991.
That's no age.
Emphysema, heavy smoking.
No.
So series sort of being killing a lot of its people young. I mean, it's Planet of the Apes that did it. I'm looking to see if I've seen him in anything else at all, and I don't recognise anything.
Well, there's the Valley of Gwangi, which was a Ray Harryhausen worked on that, and it was about where cowboys find dinosaurs and that kind of thing, which is fairly well known if you're kind of like a monster fan and that kind of thing. And he did the Cat o' Nine Tails, which is one of Dario Argento's horror films, the Italian ones.
Right. Okay. Not wildly knowledgeable on those.
No.
I've seen one or two.
So there's
So yeah. Okay. Now, a couple of minor points that I think would lead us into the point. There is everybody's been replaced, and the people they've been replaced with the exception of the leading man, are fairly decent craftsmen in their own right, but they're not quite as illustrious and not quite as expensive. And the budget is now down to 4.7 million. So we've got a drop, and we've also got a drop in running time down to 95 minutes. Something a little bit perfunctory about this.
Yeah, I think. I mean, to be fair as well, the producers did try and get Schaffner back, but this was the time when he was making Patton, so he went to do that.
That was the clash, yes.
Yeah, and Jerry Goldsmith, the same thing. He was working on Patton with Schaffner.
Not wearing a monkey mask though.
Maybe
No, he'd have been wearing an American general on his face. No, that doesn't sound right.
That doesn't sound right at all.
But we do have some returning people. Obviously, Kim Hunter, Morris Evans, and Linda Harrison are back. Roddy McDowall isn't. Roddy McDowall had a clash as well. And I can't remember what the clash was.
Yeah, he was directing a film. It was called Tam Lin, which was a kind of folk horror film.
Okay, have you seen it?
No, I haven't. It's also called The Devil's Widow, and it had Ava Gardner and Ian McShane.
Oh, how about that?
I haven't seen it, but I'm going to go and see it now because that sounds quite interesting.
Sounds pretty good.
Okay, so they don't start thinking about making this until the first one is a hit, which makes sense. But obviously, this is the only one where there's a year gap in between. But it's still a fairly fast turnaround. And they start looking at making this, and they go to Rod Serling for his ideas, and his ideas don't interest the studio. And then, so what I'm saying is that there feels, certainly in the end result, that there might be a bit of it being rushed.
Absolutely, yeah.
And they weren't sure what they decided they were going to make the film before they decided what the film was going to be.
Yeah. Which is common practice now.
It's common practice now, but just the turnaround time and so on. And I suppose we'll get into it from there. Charlie, anything you will sort of add about your history with this film or what you've thought about it? Looking at it, it's not a well thought of film. Obviously, back in the day, there weren't many. There aren't many reviews that would be aggregated on Rotten Tomatoes on older films, but off 32, it's got 38%. So it's not well thought of.
Yeah, no, there's amongst fans, it's usually a fight between this and the last film, Battle for Planet of the Apes, as to what's the worst in the series. But I mean, there's the kind of nostalgic side, but I can admit that it's not a very good film, but it is a fairly interesting film, and it's one of those films where you wonder if kind of the moments in the film that are good and that are interesting, you wonder how much they redeem the rest of the film. I mean, but I think, like you said, because of the turnaround and trying to figure out exactly what the film was going to be, a fair amount of it does just feel like a straight retread of the first act of the first film, and it's not until literally an hour into the film where they find the more remains of New York and the subway station and things that it finally actually starts to get interesting and ends, well, literally with a bang.
Chris, Becca, have you seen this before?
No, it's the first time I've seen it.
Yeah, same. I've never seen this film before until I watched it for this show.
Oh yeah, no, it's completely my first time seeing it.
Yeah.
Like,
is that the case until the Burton film from now on?
Yes.
Okay, and you've seen them all?
I've seen the Burton film once, and that was like on release. I haven't watched that one since. So my memory of it is it's next to nothing. Soon that will be like a new watch to me because it's been that long.
I watched it again 2 to 3 years ago. I can't remember if it was in the build up to War or when War came out, because I've got rid of the box set. I'll have to download them, stream them, or whatever for this. But I did buy like a box set of all of them because I had the 5 on DVD at one point. But then they produced like a box set of all of them after War, and I have a feeling I might have watched it in that, but I may have watched it in the build up to War. I'm not sure, but I've seen it twice, and I remember thinking it can't be as bad as I remember, and I didn't have a great time with it on the second viewing. But again, it's been a while for me. For me, all of them from now on I've seen, but I've not seen them often, so I know that next week's, for example, I know what the concept is. I know that there's a change from next week and what it is, and I can picture the opening titles of the film, but I don't remember a lot beyond that, and what bits are in Conquest and what bits are in Escape. And I just remember Battle checking out terribly. I was just incredibly bored by it. But this was my second viewing. But I think my first would have probably been just after Rise. I reckon that would have been what stoked enough interest to go and watch the originals. So I reckon it's been about 9 years, and I watched it. We're recording on Sunday. We missed a week. That's largely because of me, folks. Anyone listening, we couldn't do Sunday, and when we moved it to the week, I wasn't available that evening. A bit more to it than that, but we'll leave it at that. So we've missed a week, but it means I'll watch this on about Monday. We're now on Sunday, and I'm already worrying how much I'm going to remember of it, or whether there just isn't much there. Maybe that's it. Maybe I'm worried I'm not remembering much because there isn't much. But I guess we'll find out.
Well, I think, similar to last week, because there is very light, because even the first half of it is a quick retread of the first one, and then you have a bunch of it almost feels like the little elements of of the other sort of Charlton Heston sort of film, like Omega Man, that kind of a film. You have telepathic mutants and things like that. It's
the Omega Man, to anyone who's not aware, is the same basic story as I Am Legend, based on a Richard Matheson book. Richard Matheson also wrote Somewhere in Time, which was adapted into a film you'll constantly hear me rave about the score to. Anyone listening, because that's a Christopher Reeve film he made between the shoot for sort of Superman and Superman 2, with Jane Seymour from Live and Let Die, which is the last Bond commentary we did.
I Am Legend is an amazing book, and none of the film versions have ever come anywhere close to. I mean, they all kind of seem to miss the point. But
I haven't read the books, so I wouldn't know. I've read Somewhere in Time, which is again very different because it's a different hotel he stays in. It's attributable to, he's got a brain tumor in the book, he hasn't in the film. The book's set in 1896, the film is 1912. But so there are differences, but it's basically the same story. I Am Legend, I believe they changed the ending after test screenings, but I don't know the details. I just remember thinking the ending felt incongruous.
Yeah, there is a number of endings. Well, the Will Smith one. Yeah, the Will Smith one. I think it. Yeah, there's number ones, but they were kind of they were similar to the original book. They were more.
I've not seen the Omega Man either.
There's been no actual ending, as in, because the book's ending is really powerful, and it's where the title.
I was going to say, you can tell us what the ending is for the book, because we're not a book podcast, so I don't think there's a spoiler alert on that. And if you're saying the films haven't done the book's ending, providing you don't say what the film's endings are, you can say what it is.
Yeah, well, the book basically ends with him being crucified by the vampires, but basically it ends up with a complete role reversal where they crucify him because they're terrified of him. So he's become their boogeyman. And their I Am Legend is basically a reference to that, to him passing into their legend, which is usually the other way around with us.
That makes so much more sense, because the title doesn't make any sense in the film, but you just accept it because a film comes out and you go, all right, it's called I Am Legend.
Yeah. And the Will Smith one, there's two endings, and one of them tries to make out that I Am Legend refers to him having some sort of cure or something that helps them all out, and it's just trash. And whatever, I mean, Will Smith does decent work in the film.
Oh, he's fine.
But,
but it's well designed as well.
Yeah, but as soon as they go past what the actual book ending and decide to. I mean, because Richard Matheson has done so much famous stuff. I mean, he did Nightmare at 20,000 Feet, the Twilight Zone episode, the original.
Is that the Shatner one?
That's the Shatner one where he's on the plane. And
the title gave it away. I have seen that.
Yeah, he did a bunch of with Roger Corman. He did a bunch of Edgar Allan Poe scripts for Vincent Price. he wrote the original story Duel, and then wrote the screenplay.
For Steven Spielberg. The Steven Spielberg TV film that over here we think of it as his first film because it got a cinematic release.
Yeah.
In America, it was a TV film, and his debut was The Sugarland Express. But it's Dennis Weaver, isn't it? The actor.
Dennis Weaver. Yeah. I mean,
it's so similar to Jaws in its way as a story.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, if anyone's not seen Duel before Charlie talks about it, and I welcome it, please go and seek it out. It's great.
Yeah, it is. It's just an unbelievably good film, and it's kind of. I think originally it was going to be a TV movie, and they just decided to release it in the cinemas, and
but not in the States.
No, just over here, and it's such an immense film. I mean, he even did another of his Twilight Zone episodes was one called Steel, and that was adapted into Real Steel. The one with Hugh Jackman about the robot boxing.
Jackman film with the robot boxing.
Yeah. So and he did another film, another book called The Shrinking Man, which was then adapted into a film called The Incredible Shrinking Man.
Rainbow Land? Oh no, that's the man with the X-ray eyes. Sorry.
Yeah, no, sorry. With a guy called Grant Williams, and
I've not seen it.
He's on vacation with his wife on this boat, and they run into this mist. So he comes back home, and his clothes start to get really loose and big and baggy, and it turns out that he's actually shrinking, and no one can tell why. And he ends up living in a doll's house for a bit, as a run-in with a cat, and there's an interesting. Especially the relationship with his wife, there's interesting line on misogyny there as well, right. And the role of the husband versus the wife and man and woman, and then the last act is basically where he's so small that he's just been lost in his basement, and there is a spider that to him is monstrous, it's huge, and
there was a very similar episode of Mork and Mindy to that.
Really?
Yeah, have you ever seen it? There's an episode where Mork starts shrinking, and he shrinks. It's like an allergic reaction to I don't know if it's cold medicine or something like that. And he starts shrinking, and it's a two-parter. But he does go subatomic and ends up in another world, effectively.
Oh, yeah, well, I'm guessing that's
with hilarious consequences, might I add.
Well, of course, it has to be with Mork and Mindy. But the film came out in 1957. And you can get it on Blu-ray, and it's so good. It's just it's got really kind of an existential kind of feel to it as well, and it's one of the best science fiction films ever made.
Okay, I suppose to be honest, I don't mind all that conversation because I've been worried this is going to be really thin. I think we'll be all right with 3 and 4. I mean, I don't know how they'll come out in overall length at the end of the day, but I worry about Battle. It's a bit like when we did Tokyo Drift, and after all these years of 2 and 3 hour episodes, we produced an hour and 17 minutes. And it's can we put that out? And when you edit it, it doesn't feel that short. It's okay. But it's oh my God. But yeah, this some opening thoughts on this from me first then. I'm not going to say very much because I want to hear from Chris and Becca, because Becca hasn't said much for a bit. I don't think there's much here. And I think we got quite a lengthy recap of the end of the first film before we come into this. And then we get a warmed over rehash of pretty much the same film, with some of the subtlety gone in the apes are kind of a bit warmongering now and conquering. And I don't know if that's meant to be a satirical comment on the way human society develops over time to become more and more warlike, or that's what the film's trying to say. But you've got a leading man who is probably less offensive as an actor than Charlton Heston, but I'm almost going to steal this from Charlie. Sorry, Charlie, because he did say it off air, but this guy has no presence. And I think I might have said that anyway, which is why I feel comfortable saying that, but you can expand on that.
Well, I think it's just not Charlton Heston, isn't it? It's like...
No, the score... I think it hurts him that he looks a bit like him. So you do feel like you've got the TV spin-off version. A bit like when Fame went from big screen to small screen. You'd have at
Wasn't
least
that why he was cast though? Just because he did look a little bit like he resembled Heston.
That's
Is that
just
sort of why he was chosen, or I sort of read that somewhere in an interview, but I may have got that wrong.
I don't know.
No,
I'm not an expert.
listeners, if you're a fan, let us know.
But apart from that, I just find myself getting very bored. And when the film actually takes sort of a turn into the more interesting in the last, I don't know, maybe Charlie can tell me, but half an hour, let's say, I'm missing plot points. There's a couple of not very difficult things, I would imagine, because it's not that deep a film, that I don't fully get. And I think it's because I'm not concentrating very well, because I've been bored by a very dull rehash of the first film with some Charlton Heston and very poor visual effects thrown in. And that's really all I want to say. I got on with it a little better just because I remembered it being a train wreck. What it actually is a cheaper, far, far blander Planet of the Apes film. And as such, it's kind of a bit boring. And that's really all I want to say on it at this point.
I don't think it helps is that the actual script requires more special effects, because the first one, it's made in a way in which like you don't have to, apart from like the ape costumes, you don't have to rely on too great a deal on special effects too much. Whereas here you got like big force fields and
Mirages.
fire, and on top of that you got massive gun battles and whatnot. So you're gonna have you have to have an increased budget, which is like, whereas the other one you can just let the story do the work really for you.
That's counterbalanced though, Chris, by the fact that they've reused both shots and. Well, firstly, the running time is less, so you are doing less unless there's a massive amount on the cutting room floor. But also there are reuses of a couple of establishing shots, and they're reusing sets from the first film. So what you're saying is accurate, but there is an offset against that.
Yeah, it's just one of the thoughts that I had really, just that it was, it seemed to sort of like require a much like bigger budget and a much more visual flair, whereas I don't think I don't know the budget. Was it higher budget this week?
4.7. It's lower.
So you got a lower budget.
It's about to drop massively, but without giving it away, that matters less with next week's film anyway. But they are about to drop again, and the reason for where the series goes is partly the end of this film, but also you can do things cheaper, and we'll explain that next week. But it is lower. Last week's was kind of closer to the 6 million mark, so it's lost about a fifth of its budget.
I think as well, you kind of have to remember that at this time, the sequels were kind of like afterthoughts. So it's like you think of now, and you think of how when a film is successful and there's a sequel, they pump all of the money into it, and it's usually got a bigger budget and blah 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 blah. But I think here it was just like, let's see what we can make off it. But they didn't want to kind of, because the risk was there.
Yeah, so basically the sequels weren't really thought of, so maybe there was less thought gone into it, or.
Well, yeah, not necessarily thought, but I guess just kind of more, even more of kind of experimentation, and again because a lot of the time the idea from certainly the studios and that kind of thing was the idea that with a sequel, people just wanted to see the same thing again. Which is potentially why so much of it is so similar to the original film. But again, it's one of the reasons that the Planet of the Apes really kind of changed the landscape for film and franchise films as well.
What do you make of it, Charlie?
I think for an hour, it's boring, really boring. I mean, I've seen it loads of times anyway, but today I was watching it and I got up several times and did housework while I was watching it because I just wasn't that interested in it. But again, this is the stuff where it's just a carbon copy of what happened in Planet of the Apes. They goes and sees Zira, and then they get captured, and then they escape, and then they go off and they find the Forbidden Zone. And it's only when they get to the Forbidden Zone and they start exploring the stuff that we only saw a tiny bit of in the previous film that the film actually starts getting interesting. And you actually...
There's an establishing model. It is a very obvious model, but there's an establishing shot of a destroyed city.
Yeah.
Which tells you they're in sort of New York State, basically. I think
Yeah.
it was New York. I can't really remember.
Yeah,
but
he finds the sign as well on the subway line.
That's right. Sorry, yes. And I looked
Poster.
that up because I'm not that au fait with the subway, and it was from the New York subway system.
Yeah.
So they are in New York State, one assumes, unless he's walked for like months. So that's kind of interesting, I suppose, that it's sort of really playing up the sort of Armageddon aspect.
Absolutely, and again, it's when the mutants come in and all that kind of thing, and the bomb and all that kind of stuff. And I mean, this is stuff that Paul Dane apparently, when he came on, really was really conscious to put in because of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. I mean, he wrote a book of poems that was published about war and about atomic destruction.
Okay.
And that kind of thing. So, and certainly as well Vietnam, because there's the scene where they're off on their march and the chimpanzees are all protesting.
Okay.
And that's straight out of Vietnam.
Yes.
So that's the stuff that kind of makes the film interesting is where these political and social things come in, both purposely and just as a byproduct of when it was made.
Chris, what did you make of it?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of similar because that was my main takeaway. Was it seemed to be very more a comment on nuclear war, but I suppose it's on the button with that pun intended. I think you know what everyone's kind of said is kind of right. It's kind of a bit so what, a bit of a rehash of the first half. You have not-Charlton Heston kind of sort of almost like sort of catching up in double speed with like everything what's happened. What? There's a planet of apes? And like what? Oh my god, it's another one. He can talk, and all this, and he escapes, and he's only got one guy who dies and that. But then it starts to sort of go a bit like, yeah, fuck it. It's like there's mutants who can telepath. There's a big fuck off nuclear bomb there, and it kind of like it kind of runs with a lot of ideas. I remember sort of so again I watched this like must have been about a week ago now. So my memory of it's going, but yeah, it seemed to kind of like make a comment on religion, nuclear war, a lot more. But yeah, I was kind of astounded because it kind of started to get a bit. All right, well, this is kind of getting a bit interesting, a bit, sort of playing with ideas, and the ending is just and everyone dies. I just thought, great. It kind of reminded me of the thing you sort of say just to like kind of like end the story. You don't know how to end it. You just go like, and then they
all went over tea.
Yeah. Yeah, I just love the idea of building up this big climactic cliffhanger. It's like, oh my god, and what happens next? And then everyone dies. The end. So I don't know. It's kind of it's a bit of an odd box, really. I don't know. In some regards, it's it's not something that I would rush to watch again. But it was watchable, especially in the last part. But again, like Charlie said, it's not a good film, but it's it has interesting stuff in it. But it's not entirely terrible. It's watchable. Like especially in the last half. You got like telepathic cell fights and shit. So Becca.
Dear oh dear. Where do I start? No, I think this is.
Oh, I feel a ranting coming.
No, this is why I'm so glad that we have Charlie on the show, but especially for the series as well. So I know he's obviously a big fan of the series. Obviously, as we kind of mentioned at the top of the show, like either myself or Chris have kind of obviously we've seen the original and obviously seen the Burton remake, but like neither of us have seen like the original series. And yeah, every time we go through and watch these films, it'll be the first time watching them for the show. So it's kind of why I'm really glad that we do have. Obviously, Dave is very knowledgeable about the films, and Charlie also. So
wildly, but yeah.
Well, you've both seen them before and you know a bit about them. That's putting it mildly. So I kind of feel
in the land of the blind, yeah. Yeah.
You go into kind of like the production and any kind of behind the scenes information, things like that. Basically, with a film this dull, I'm grateful that we have Charlie and Dave as well, so I can learn more about this film and what it's trying to say, what it's trying to do. And even though it kind of falls flat on its face, the ending is quite prophetic, and kind of like in the scope of the original series, it kind of means quite a lot. It's commentary on nuclear war and kind of how, especially kind of going into sort of the counterculture type movies into kind of this late 60s, early 70s, and how there was from America definitely the finger was poised on that button that went well into the 1980s, a sort of threat of nuclear war. So yeah, I mean, like yourselves, I kind of felt the whole, like the middle section of this film could easily be chopped out, and literally it could be like just an hour, for example. Even though it's got quite a fairly short runtime, an hour and a half, not a lot happens. The first part of the film is just basically a rehash of the first film, and then kind of things really get interesting till we get underneath and we kind of learn about the mutants and the warhead and all the rest of it as well. And then there's a little bit of skirmish between not-Charlton Heston and Charlton Heston at the end, and then it just ends, and it's like, oh, okay. So yeah, I'm very grateful that we have Charlie. He's more knowledgeable and can tell us, a lot about these things, kind of how the film was made and what kind of behind the scenes tidbits of information, which make it all the more interesting. Because unfortunately I found this film really dull, really boring. But having seen it a couple of times now and known a little bit more about behind the scenes and kind of what it's saying, I've got a little bit more appreciation for it. But still, yeah, I would have to agree with you guys, and not very much happens only towards the end, the conclusion. So yeah, I really did struggle with my first viewing, and I kind of forced myself to kind of watch it again, and was like, oh, okay, yeah. But I would also agree with Dave's point, where like there are some parts where if you're not paying attention, they can be easily missed, and they're not terribly difficult concepts. But with this film that's quite dull and plodding, you really do have to kind of tune yourself in. So I would agree. So I didn't have a good time with this film, but I think probably when I see the others and kind of watch it in context with this original series, I probably have a deeper understanding of it than I did this time.
I don't think so in some respects, in that it does link to where we go next week, but it not only is it hurt by being not great, let's be honest, but it falls between the first one, which is iconic for all the reasons we talked about last week, and the next one, which takes the series in a different direction. And I have to say 3 and 4 are my favourites. So
okay.
My favourites of the original 5. So this is kind of watered down Planet of the Apes before we go in a new and fresh direction.
Yeah, it's kind of like previously on Planet of the Apes. This is,
And
sort
it
of
does
happens.
play a little bit. I mean, not with the Taylor stuff, and
No.
not with. There are things in this film that wouldn't fit with that, but in the whole idea of rehashing it with a similar looking guy at double speed, like Chris said, it is like almost they've decided to retool the show for the film for a TV show.
It does seem very much
And
like
this
for a
is
TV
kind of
audience.
like this is kind of could have been a 1 hour pilot for it.
Yeah.
Where
But
they
it's
just
kind
go,
of like just a,
here is
sort
here
of.
is the Taylor on TV, if you like, and here's the first episode.
But here's the thing when thinking about it, because I did one of the things I did think about was when it came to like say the last half or that last third, things have seemed to escalate it in a completely different direction. It's so much so that you think, how the fuck did we get here? Do you know what I mean? Like I was thinking, well, if this was a TV show, like this would be like third or fourth season in, like from
Yes.
Yeah, that's
you
true.
know what I mean?
Actually.
Like
It would be a little bit like that.
it's like, hang on, what? There's mutants and what's going on? Like, it seems to kind of like gone done way too much way quickly to kind of like. I mean, but at the same time, I kind of like that wacky idea. But one of the things I did pick up on was I remember was when the mutants are singing the hymns, they sing all creatures bright and wonderful, don't they? But not the actual tune. They sing
They
it
sort of do
like
it off key a little bit.
this, and I was like, thinking,
Yeah, they change words.
and I'm
Yeah.
and I was thinking, well, why have they done that? Is that like some sort of? Well, I thought, is that lazy or is that just a bit random? But I thought actually no, that makes sense because they probably got the lyrics from it, but probably don't know what the actual or what music was because there's no memory or recording of it, so they probably made their own, or it's like a random melody. And I thought, oh, that's just some thought gone into that. Possibly, maybe I'm like giving it praise that it doesn't deserve. I don't know, but it was a thought that maybe there was some thought into like how the mutants develop because they kind of worship at the altar of the nuclear weapon. Because
Well, no,
go on.
sorry, go on.
No. That's pretty much it. It just seems to be that's how time kind of has altered things. It's like only fragments of what's happened and what they left and what they actually understand of the world is what they worship because it's like, oh, what's all we have? So okay, we'll worship this.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, everything's tied to the bomb, so it's kind of we're gonna all our religion has been kind of perverted to such a degree that it is just all centered around worshipping this atomic bomb. And so I'm guessing I don't know if they had the song and then just decided to change the lyrics. I mean, I guess it's just put in there. Probably by Paul Dane to just be something that's a bit kind of sly and a bit satiric and also maybe a
bit eerie as well.
a thing on religion as well and how people of religion use their agenda to fit use the Bible to fit their agenda and they twist the words. And that's something that's particularly relevant in the film.
Yeah, so it's like last week. So it's things that are always relevant. But yeah, I think that's what we do, isn't it? Really, we use whatever agenda, whatever it is, whatever our like belief system is. It's not even religion really. It's we all like have this sort of core belief and. We always tend to there's always, especially in groups as well. We always have a tendency to manipulate our belief.
Definitely. Should we get into this film sequentially, folks?
Yes.
I should take
better.
about
Why
5
not?
fucking minutes.
Yeah, you could skip most of it, but we talked about that last week.
Yeah, we'll skip to like the middle point of this film.
I mean, I kept doing time checks, but like I say, although I've got a good memory, 6 days ago on a film that I don't find wildly memorable and I've now forgotten, but there was a lengthy redux of showing the last sort of scene of the film, but it's all the way back to when they sort of come out of the cave, so it's quite a long bit.
I think they kind of edit little bits.
It still seems quite a few minutes.
Yeah.
Do we stay with Taylor? That's right. We stay with them into new scenes where he's basically talking to Nova about starting a family and stuff, which again creeps me out very slightly.
I'm trying to teach her to talk.
Yeah. Nova.
Yeah, literally.
And then
do it phonetically.
And then basically they're riding sort of towards the sort of or into the Forbidden Zone, which is where they were going to go. And then suddenly there's a wall of fire, and Taylor literally disappears, literally fades into like nothing.
Yeah, and he goes to investigate, and then just sort of like falls in it.
Yes.
And that's it for the Taylor story until what, last 20 minutes?
Yeah.
He's in it for like sort of 20 minutes or something, isn't it?
And that's Charlton Heston. So then,
if only there was another Charlton Heston we could be going along with.
Charlton Heston, fake Charlton Heston, look-alike.
So Nova kind of runs off, tries to find. Where's she go? Is she just sort of like just randomly runs off, or she deliberately going to back to the apes really?
I think she goes to find Cornelius and Zira.
Yes, Cornelius played by somebody different this week. Forgot his name. David Watson, something like that.
Yeah, he seems like a completely different person, like literally.
Well, he literally is, but he doesn't really even remind me of Roddy McDowell.
No, I just thought he was a completely different character. I was just like, whoa.
Yeah. To start, if she wasn't calling him by his name, you'd just assume she's remarried, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I think. Hold on a minute. But no, I did sort of think it's interpretation of. Well, not that I'm an expert or anything, but it just seems like he was playing a different character, just to me anyway. Mm-hmm. But that's just my opinion. It's probably wrong, but never mind. But I found it quite entertaining.
So so then we have not-Charlton Heston in another spaceship and another.
This doesn't make any sense to me. I don't know, because when we watched the first film, Charlton Heston, before he goes into deep sleep, already knows that, like, it's at that point 700 years later on Earth.
Yeah.
So they set off before knowing that there's time dilation, right? Now, I stress that only because it isn't like they were moving in normal time, go into deep sleep and then go through some wormhole, time hole or whatever. Even if they did do that, they were already going to be hundreds of years in the future. So why'd you send someone to look for him? I mean, firstly, it's like finding a needle in a haystack. But secondly, if you find him and bring him back, and it was only that 700 years, you'd be 1,400 years in the future at least, if not 2,100, because he's got to get there, find him, and get back. And as it turns out, it's over 2,000 years anyway.
And again, so they
it doesn't make any sense. That screams make anything up for a sequel.
Yeah, and they retcon it so it is some sort of distortion or phenomenon, space phenomenon that makes them go fast that far into the future, as opposed to just doing it because you are actually exploring.
Yeah.
So it's like, and he comes at exactly the right time.
Yeah, just a few weeks after or whatever it is.
And his mate dies.
Yeah. Skipper.
Yeah.
Which is the most sort of what's the sidekick name ever, isn't it?
Well, presumably if he's Skipper, he's his captain.
Oh yeah, true.
It could be that. It could be that.
Yeah.
Definitely. But I never really thought of that. I went the same way as Chris. It's like, oh, you can't even be bothered with the fucking characters this time, can you?
Isn't that like a kind of lassie dog? Sounds like it. I think it's Flipper as well.
So so this character's called Brent, which makes me constantly think of The Office.
He's like, oh, that's
Same,
backfired.
same.
He lands and he's like 39.55. That's backfired, isn't it? I'm performing how I want to perform. Yeah. And he immediately runs into Nova, and it's like, yeah. I mean, you know how big the States is, and how big like some of the states within the United States is. You know what I mean? And it's like he bumps straight into Nova.
Yeah, it's like It's logically they would like.
He's gone there, right? He's gone out into space to find Taylor. Immediately lands on the right planet, quote unquote, in the right era,
place,
and immediately bumps into. This is like
the right place as well. Like you could end up on the other side of the fucking world.
This is like Kirk Bock. It was bumping into Spock in the ice cave in the 2009 Star Trek. This is like, what were the chances?
Yeah. So yes, it bumps into Nova, and notice that like he's wearing dog tags.
Yeah, which again is handy that he gave her them, because he seemed to be trying to. I mean, this guy was quite ambitious. He couldn't get her to say Nova, but he was hoping to get her to read at the same time off a fucking dog tag. But that, like, I think that's why he was. Why she's got them. I think that's why. I think it was to do with his name being embossed on them. But there you go. So he's now. They now become like not a couple per se, but he's effectively stepped straight into like the gap Taylor has like left, and they head off to like Ape City.
Yeah, so go back to once they came to find Kira and Cornelius. And yeah, so basically the gorillas are basically sort of like off the back of what's happened, and like they're going, no, we need to go into the Fib Zone and basically create war. You know, we're just going to sort of wipe them out because they're a threat. So they're like leading the surge, and Kira's not being too thrilled by not standing up, even though she's told to, because otherwise she'd be executed for not being. I suppose patriotic is the word, I guess, but for disobedience. So. Yeah, and then so obviously they go back, and Nova and Brent just sort of manage to sneak in, and they're like, "Oh my god, you found another one, another one who could talk. Another
Taylor."
I just thought, because when she sees them, I mean, it might be a bit of a comment on racism there, in that like humans all look the same to them, sort of. But she sees him and sort of says, Taylor, when Zira sees him. And it's like, yeah, the audience has thought that as well, to be fair.
I think we all thought the same. I was like, hold on a minute, I've seen you before. It looks familiar somehow.
Is that your Charlton Heston impression, Becca?
No. I don't do.
So they're with Cornelius and Kira. So what happens next?
I just think we're going to struggle with the next 45 minutes of the film, because what happens next?
Should we skip? Should we just kind of skip through?
Well, we see how much more militaristic they seem than in the first film, and I just think it's just a blunter film. It's not as well written.
Yeah, but I mean, you've got someone here that's kind of taking over from Dr. Zaius and leading the guerrillas, Ursus.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
Yeah,
you've
I
got
wonder
a
if it here
figurehead
that we
there.
sort of see seeing the more militant side, and we kind of see more about the hierarchy and structure of like ape societies, for example. So I don't know.
Yeah,
no.
so you've got because the guerrillas are generally regarded as being kind of stupid and because of that very kind of warmongering. So when they show up to Caesar and Cornelius, the Brent and Nova, then they ask for some food and a map to find out where exactly they're supposed to go, and then they get captured. And then Cyrus says, "Make sure you don't talk," because she says they'll dissect you and they'll kill you in that order.
Yeah, that line made me wince. I was like, "Urgh."
Individual bits like that play really well.
Yeah,
It's a shame the
And
whole
they've
film isn't
taken-
like that.
They've built on the right things from the first film there, in that yes, him being arrested is a rehash, but they do call it out by sort of saying, well, we had a guy in your position, he spoke, and it was the worst thing he could have done.
yeah. And then they all the sorry, Cole.
No, you carry on. I was about to ask a question, but I think you're about to answer it, so carry on.
Yeah, so they get captured, and they say they're going to be used for target practice. And you have a montage of all the apes, all the gorillas with bayonets and stuff, and just being generally kind of aggressive. And then they kind of are being taken away in this wagon. And obviously ape security is incredibly lax because Zero is there with a key and says, "Oh, I just need to make sure it's actually locked properly," and then just unlocks the
Yeah,
back.
that wagon is like worst security ever.
Unlocks the back of the cage, and they're off again, and they put him into Charlton Heston's loincloth, someone presumably. So they're off to do the Forbidden Zone, and you've got Dr. Zaius and the gorillas who are. They say they found that there's some intelligence in their Forbidden Zone somewhere that can possibly be a threat to them. So they march off to there to confront that threat.
But again, you can read things into this film that I don't know if they're there or not, but they fit the era of the film. In the there's a comment here on the sort of the preemptive strike, isn't there?
Yeah.
And the whole idea, and at that time there were spheres of influence. There were, areas that were effectively under the USSR, and areas that were sort of under the United States, and then sort of disputed areas where the United States wouldn't allow communism to, and felt the need to get involved in stuff. And the rights and wrongs of that can be debated, but whether that's a point this film is making, I don't know, or that they just need a plot, but it certainly fits the era the film comes from. And at this point, America is bogged down in Vietnam, where they just did not need to get involved.
Exactly. And where you say there's the scene where the chimpanzees are all there protesting about the aggression of the gorillas, and Dr. Zaius just kind of says, "Yeah, okay, quietly go and take them all out." So then they get all
it's
beaten
not just
up
like
by
it's
the
not just like
gorillas.
move them along. It's just like just take them aside and execute them.
I found that a bit brutal. I kind of thought, well, obviously this film, I think the series is obviously making commentaries on like Vietnam, and sort of the race for nuclear war, things like that as well. And I kind of felt like this was a scene. It could have had a lot more impact. I mean, it was quite brutal, like the way that he dealt with the students. But I sort of felt like this was like the one chance to have a commentary, and it, I kind of felt like it could have been more than what it was. I mean, it was still still a commentary on the situation at the time, but I kind of felt, it could be more. So I was a little bit disappointed with the scene, unfortunately.
Well, I mean, at the time, I think people certainly being very careful about what they say.
Of course, yeah, definitely.
I mean, I suppose while the film was being made in 1969, there was a place called People's Park in Berkeley, which was created really because of all the people protesting.
Hence People's Park.
Yeah, exactly. And Ronald Reagan had kind of criticised them and was saying that all the kind of people there were communists and that kind of thing. So they were having rallies and things like that, and they weren't just this Vietnam stuff, but there was also stuff that was going on in the Middle East as well. And there was a lot of violence against protesters, and one guy was shot and killed. And I think it was in the middle of 1969. So all this kind of stuff was really going on
at the time.
Exactly, going on at the time. And because they had a point where they flew helicopters over the park, dispensing tear gas on the protesters. And kind of just the kind of crazy stuff that they were doing against these people that were trying to call out stuff that was happening at that time, because there was also at the same time the My Lai massacre, which was just horrendous and one of the biggest atrocities that happened in the war. I mean, that happened in 1968. So again, all this stuff that's really going on, and it is being protested. And so I think this is probably Paul Dane again, really kind of trying to pull some of that into the film, which would get even more politically charged in the next couple of films.
Like I say, I think we'll see it more kind of like in the third and fourth film, definitely, just from the trailer footage that I've seen. But I kind of felt like it was, I mean, obviously, it's quite important that we do see sort of like student protests and things like that, but I just kind of felt like it was a bit watered down a little bit, considering everything that's going on at the time. So now I do appreciate, like, for example, the scene where the mutants are unmasked at the end. Obviously, there's a fair degree of censorship there as well, especially when something is so sensitive. And even though it's happening on an alien planet, sounds really bad, but I don't mean like that at all.
It isn't.
A planet that's not Earth.
No, it is Earth.
But it is Earth.
That's the point.
No,
did you watch last week's film?
I know.
They've got that.
It's not.
What
You know what I mean? It's very close to home, is what I'm trying to say.
It's just a mere coincidence that they have something like the Statue of Liberty.
You know what I mean?
Actually, Becca did know it was Earth. I think what you're trying to say is it's not.
Oh, it was Earth all along.
It's not. Yeah, but it's not. It's not our
experience.
Exactly. It's moved on.
Yeah, to us it kind of seems. Yeah, thank you. Help me backtrack. There's just things when you're reading an article about the film and you happen to pick up the words. But yeah, it just kind of feels like where it is so far removed, but it's still like a commentary as well. But I do think, even though we see a snapshot of it here, and then it kind of obviously goes on to be a commentary on sort of threat of nuclear war. I'm trying to pronounce that probably because I'm one of these people who will pronounce it incorrectly. Annihilation towards the end of the film. But it seems to me that obviously the first film as well, and the sort of like the third and fourth are kind of more, I don't know, more politically charged, shall we say? But I don't know. I'll find that out when I come to watch it.
Okay, where do we want to go from here in plot? Is there much more we want to talk about before we get to the good stuff?
No, it's just they get to the forbidden zone before the gorillas.
We don't really know what happens to Kira and Cornelius, though, do we? After this, do I remember right? We don't see them after this.
Yeah. You know what I'm struggling to decide whether to say, Charlie, or don't you?
Yeah.
I mean, I know it gets explained next week, but I don't think in terms of this film we see what happens, do we? We don't know what.
Well, there's to be honest, there's not a huge amount of room for them because this is very kind of militarized, and because you've got the guerrillas rampage, and it's kind of because all of that. They wouldn't be there with the gorillas because of how chimpanzees are kind of seen, again, because shown by the approaches and stuff, as kind of very pacifistic as opposed to the gorillas. So yeah, it is kind of it's because of the nature of the plot. Then they've kind of been not, and again because it's not Roddy McDowell. I don't know how much of that was down to giving him to the minimum scenes as well. I mean, one scene that interests me.
It's like Mark McFly's dad, isn't it?
The what?
It's like Mark McFly's dad in Back to the Future 2.
Oh yeah.
Oh, I see what you mean. Sorry, yeah. Shoot him in a load of makeup upside down, and it's Jeffrey Weissman who can sort of do a vocal impression.
And then, but have little as possible before anyone notices.
Yeah. And get sued.
And then get sued in that case, yeah. Because they did actually use Crispin Glover without his permission in shots repurposed from the first film.
There was one thing I wanted to point out which I thought was quite interesting when the gorillas get to the Forbidden Zone and they see all the visions, illusions, and then you see the lawgiver statue bleeding. And you see all the fire and all of these gorillas that are supposedly captured, hanging upside down and being burnt to death, which is quite a powerful. And again, it's something that a comment on religion and how religious iconography is used as suggestion on people's minds.
Say that again. Sorry.
How religious iconography and imagery is used as a way to influence people's minds.
Yes.
I mean, for all intents and purposes, those gorillas were being crucified.
Yeah.
Still a bit of a giveaway.
Well, it does
that's
look a bit
illusion,
like
though,
that.
isn't it? Because like, if you see that thing, holy shit, that's definitely not real because I'm seeing the statue bleed. I've seen a statue that wasn't there before.
Yeah, but these are people that have seen people falling from the sky that can talk.
I know, I'm being flippant. I'm just
Yeah. So so it's kind of it's just to see their religion being used in a blasphemous way, and the response to it was really interesting. And again, putting the divide between the gorillas and the orangutans by Dr. Zayas figuring out that it is an illusion.
Mm.
So then we go in and we find out that there's a giant cathedral under the water. Under the water?
Yeah,
Sorry.
they find like an old subway station, don't they?
Yeah, and then a giant cathedral under the ground, to say. The New York cathedral. And the sets are really good.
The set of the subway is very good because it just evokes a subway that's kind of fallen apart. But also we did have that establishing shot of the city, so a destroyed New York. So
because that cathedral was a set as well.
Yeah, and it really does. I mean, it's all retrospective because I don't think they had this in mind when they made the first one, but it really outlines why Zayas didn't want apes and going into this region because it would give too much away. I thought that, when they got there, it would look like Death Valley or something. And when they got there, no, it's the remnants of our society. You couldn't have shown that in the first film, except as a replacement for the reveal of the Statue of Liberty at the end. That's the only way you could have done it, because it just would have given too much away. But that's why. It just shows you what ignorance the apes are being held in.
Yeah. And then it introduces the mutants, or these guys who are apparently there. And
I need this bit explained. When I said it at the start of the film, or the start of the recording, I think I said it on air, that there are bits towards the end of the film that I don't think are remotely difficult. I just think my attention span drifts, even though this is the best bit of the film. And very basic things I don't get. And what I mean by that is the mutation, because I took it on trust that, well, I suppose it's in the aftermath of a nuclear war. So, yeah, they've mutated and then learned how to cover that with effectively prosthetics in our vernacular, I suppose.
Yeah.
Masks, whatever you want to call them. But then it occurred to me, hang on a minute, you've got human beings, you've got apes. They're not all mutated, unless that's what's mutated the apes into a higher being. But they certainly don't have like skin falling off and look almost like lizards. So I thought, are they mutated because they're so close to this bomb, or are they mutated from an Armageddon that took place somewhere between Taylor leaving Earth and this era? Do you know, Charlie?
Well, I kind of took it that it was just generally from the fallout of the city. Because I guess the thought is they've probably grown up in that, they were born in that city, born underground. So they were probably born to be from people who already had that disease from the fallout. Presumably, I don't know how many of them actually go outside.
Yeah, I mean, I guess so, and it is in a different area, and you don't know what the fallout's
I mean,
like.
there's holes you can poke in it.
But I'm not really looking to. I'm just getting to
No.
a point where I'm like, did I miss something? It's entirely possible I did. And it sounds like I didn't, but there are a couple of ways you could explain this that would leave you probably going, yeah, okay, that's all right.
Yeah.
So the reveal, what this film has the luxury of doing is giving Brent his reveal at the start of Act 3, not the end of it. Because we, the audience, already know. So we do have an act of him coming to terms with it. But like Chris says, that still leaves 2 acts where we've just rehashed the first film.
Yeah. It's kind of like, I guess, in terms of the risk for this film being made, it's kind of having your cake and eat it. So you've got the first 2 acts that are reminiscent as much as they can be of the first film and what people expect, and then you do a 180 in the last act, and you say, okay, you've had your fun, we're going to have ours.
Absolutely.
And we're going to do that by introducing mutants that look like humans.
And again, I don't know if it's making a point, because we sat and we watched Planet of the Apes, where the apes have been corrupted by sort of the interplay of, it is basically the merging of church and state.
Yeah.
And this is an American film, and it's constitutionally sort of mandated that you don't have that. I mean, in British schools, for example, unless you get an exemption, we have to like pray and stuff, even though we're not a particularly religious country compared to the United States, who are not allowed to do that. So this is what happens when you mix church and state. Whether they meant to say that, I don't know. But we've gone that, like, the more that they've advanced, the more they've regressed as a society. And then this week we meet the sort of human survivors, and actually they've become this sort of weird religious cult in and of themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it reminds me. Chris was talking about earlier where they sing "All Creatures Great and Small."
Yeah.
Now that was a hymn that was sung every time in the school I went to, in the primary school at least.
Yeah.
And again, we it wasn't a religious school. It wasn't a school where we were asked to go and pray.
No, it's a strange irony it's a strange irony of British schools that they put. I don't know if it still is, but it was put in the national curriculum around the time Charlie and I would have went to school. That there had to be an act of worship every day, right, in school. And yet, I promise, because I know we got quite a lot of North American listeners, I promise you, we are nothing like as religious a nation as you are. We're just not. That's not to say the person listening is religious, but it permeates your society, your values, and everything so much more. We are a very secular society, and yet it's mandated in our schools.
Yeah, and yeah, my kids still they do hymns in primary. Well, my daughter does hymns in primary school.
Right, so it's still there.
Yeah, and I'm kind of half and half on it, really, to be honest with you. But even without getting into that, yeah, so it's kind of, that permeation of religion that's there. And again, I guess it is a comment on religion and how it evolves as we do. But obviously here, the religion has evolved to worship a brand new deity, in this case, a atomic bomb.
Yeah. What do they think it is? Do they think it's a bomb? I can't remember. This is what I'm saying. There's bits in the last act.
They know it's a bomb.
If I'd enjoyed the first two acts, I'd have breezed through this because I fully understand that there is nothing difficult here. But there's just details that I suddenly go, did I miss that? And because I've not really enjoyed the film, I go, I'll just leave it. I'll ask Charlie.
Because they know it's a bomb because they know that they if they get taken over, they can blow it up. And there is kind of religious stuff going on where they talk about it being an act of peace.
Yeah, because the idea of we don't harm, like they mentioned it's like we don't kill anyone, we get people to kill themselves. It's like, all right, so you do.
Yeah, we haven't really mentioned that. I don't think that's what the mirages are all around about. You drive people crazy and they do what you can, or they fight each other. I mean, Taylor and Brent have a fight at one point.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, let's say we're peaceful people. We don't, we don't actively kill anyone. We get them to do it themselves. It's like, well, you kind of. But I think it's like whatever their reality is. It's like to them, it's like the bomb. It's an odd thing to really explain out loud, but it's like it's how you see,
God.
It's how you see the world. It's like to them, that is absolutely perfectly logical. It's like, well, we don't actively do that,
Well, to them, the atomic bomb is their creator, is their God. They are like that because of the bomb. That is who they are now.
That makes sense.
It's their Big Bang, I guess.
In their state. Well, the creation myth in their state of evolution. So I mean, I don't know how much we've mentioned that they're telepathic as well. So when Brent first meets them, we hear his answers, but we don't hear their questions because they're asking him questions in his mind, and it's only until they kind of figure out that. Talk about him as if he's stupid and they have to speak out loud to him.
Yeah, because they all like pound him with questions, don't they?
Yeah. And then they put him in a cell with Taylor.
Yeah. Bear in mind, I didn't do a time check on this, but if for argument's sake we're an hour and a quarter in, we've not seen Taylor since 6-7 minutes in, probably.
Yeah.
So he's disappeared. He only came back on the basis that he would be, spoiler alert, folks, but you're that far into this recording. He came back on the. He said he would come back and do a few scenes. I think they shot everything with him in about 8 days, and he said that as long as his character was killed off.
Yeah, originally he wanted it killed off right away at the beginning, and then they came back.
But he sounds like, for all Charlton Heston's faults, it sounded like he compromised with them quite fairly on this.
Oh yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
Richard Zanuck spoke to him, and he just basically said, "Look, I took a massive bet on Planet of the Apes, and you profited from it. Now just do me a favour." I think
didn't he donate his thing to charity as well, or something?
He did. Yes, he did.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'd forgotten that detail. He did. Yes.
It's interesting as well that this part of the film also reminds me very much of the Star Trek pilot, The Cage.
We when we talked about those episodes when Charlie joined us for that series, we didn't cover The Cage, but we covered The Menagerie, which reuses all the same stuff, but in the actual continuity of Kirk's era and all the rest of it. Is it the mind control element?
Yeah, and the kind of the illusions and the suggestions from that.
just as a quick reminder, Captain Pike, the original captain of the Enterprise, who's going to be in his own series next year. I think it's next year.
Yes.
Strange New Worlds or something, new Star Trek. I'm ambivalent on that because I really, really like Pike, but I really fucking hate Alex Kurtzman and what they do with current Star Trek. Because I've watched 2 episodes of Discovery now and 1 of Picard, and I've gone all the way through it, reviewing episodes, going, well, it's okay, and then I got to the end and I've just thought, no, I hate this, it's shit. But Pike was like the best fucking thing in it.
Yeah.
Although I didn't like that he was in it because it's a series that doesn't know what it wants to be. It's just like, are we nostalgia? Are we plotting our own course? New Star Trek has nothing to say. But within that, the new design of the Enterprise inside, the bridge and all that, and Pike, fantastic. So there's a chance if they get the right showrunner. But the point is, somewhere between that and the original series, he got badly hurt. You actually see it in an episode of Discovery, second season. He gets hurt, and by the time we see him in the menagerie, the sort of wraparound bits to the footage, he's in like a wheelchair, only able to sort of communicate by beeps. He can't move anything, and he's badly burnt. Part of that is that it isn't the same actor, and he's just broken. And what they're trying to do is get him back to the planet that was in the cage, because the mind control and illusions can give him the illusion of a real life.
Yeah. And then the fight that Brent and Taylor have reminds me of kind of like some of the fights on Star Trek, and when you had Spock and Kirk fighting against each other, just with a lot more blood and a bit more viciousness. And again, you have this idea that the mutants are not going to cause any actual harm themselves. They're going to make other people do it.
Yeah.
And this is where Nova finally finds the ability to talk.
Yeah, because like they decide to sort of bring Nova in as they're doing this. It's sort of like, just have to pass along. Yeah, so like Nova managed to walk past and says, "Taylor."
With a very sort of clear. They have to do it right in that she doesn't say it. She doesn't quite pronounce it how we would, as people who are used to speaking a lot, but her voice is quite strong for someone who's never spoken.
Yeah, and she slurs it.
That's it. It doesn't come out quite right. Yeah.
Taylor.
Yeah.
And then that distracts the.
That distracts the telepath long enough to break them out. Yeah, they break themselves out basically.
Yeah.
And this is where you've sort of got the apes closing in, and sorry, the apes.
Well, then the door locks, doesn't it?
Sorry.
They managed to kill like the mutant, but the door locks on them, so they can't get out. And then I think they managed to break out, but it takes them a bit of time. I think.
By which point the gorillas are in there.
Yeah.
So all the gorillas are coming in and shooting all the mutants, and then Nova's shot. Is she shot?
Yeah, she is.
Yeah. And then you've got Taylor and Brent seeing who are there, we're trying to work together, while Dr. Zayas and Ursus are fighting over what to do with the bomb. And because Ursus is an idiot gorilla, he just tells his people to grab it and pull it down with ropes.
Because he doesn't know what it is, and he's kind of looking at it as like, in the kind of like, it's their, that it's basically sort of considering it as a statue.
It's pulling over their statue of like Saddam or whatever.
Yeah. It's their religion over there.
But also, obviously, they've now got to stop this happening. So Brent and Taylor are sort of trying to stop that. It's as simple as that. Taylor sort of by it and gets shot.
In the case, because they effectively start setting the bomb off, doesn't he? By pulling it down.
Yeah. So it's about to go off. Brent tries to stop it, but Taylor tries to stop it and gets shot. Brent sort of gets hold of a rifle, kills Ursus and a few others, and he's then shot dead.
Violently.
And then basically they sort of that's it, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, and then Taylor, with his final act, says to Dr. Zayas, "You bloody bastards!"
I hate you, you bastard.
And then
So at the end of the last film, he cursed everyone for blowing it up, and now he's like cursing everyone before he blows literally everything up.
Yeah, well, I think as soon as Nova dies, that's his last. It's insinuated that that's his last kind of straw, really. And then he falls over, and his last act is pushing down the pre-Superman crystal kind of activation thing.
Yeah.
And there's kind of that the weird thing they always use for nuclear atomic weapons, where the screen kind of inverts colors.
Yeah.
And then there's just a narration.
Sometimes it goes like a negative or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Or fade to white, or sometimes.
Yeah.
Fade to white, negative, or something like that, or just like almost like a whiteout.
Yeah, and then the narration says, "In one of the countless billions of galaxies in the universe lies a medium-sized star, and one of its satellites, a green and insignificant planet, is now dead."
The end.
Black. Credits with nothing. No music. Anything. And that's it.
Can
So
be
like
quite
that
Which is
whole
crazy.
that
It is
whole
kind of a
bomb killed the
nihilistic
rest of the
era for
world.
film.
Yeah.
We are going into one of the most pessimistic eras for films ever.
Yeah.
The 70s, and it does start around there. Think of a lot of films around this era we could name that ended in like the leads dying and things like that. It's not that unusual.
No.
The trouble is, it's in a weaker film than some of the examples we might come up with, and as such, it does feel like you said, Chris, almost like a little bit cop out. Like, I guess we're done. Bye.
I mean, I think the problem is because everything else felt like everything is happening at like a double, treble speed. It's like, before you know it, you're watching like the first film, but like but in fast forward, and then all of a sudden it's like, shit, mutants! Like, how the fuck did we get here? And then it's like, and then you get into like, the whole world blows up, and you're thinking like, well, how the fuck did we get to that?
25 minutes ago we hadn't even met the mutants or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, it's a fairly suitable end, really, in thematic terms. And I mean, it's especially if you can watch the films in kind of, I call it pseudo chronological order, where you kind of you start off with next week's film, Escape from the Planet of the Apes, and then Conquest, and then you go to Battle, and then you go to the original Planet of the Apes, and this ends up being the last film in the actual series.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. I mean, especially in terms of the inspiration for the ending. So it's especially because the ending kind of coming out abruptly. What happened was that at the time, 20th Century Fox was going through a massive bad period, and they lost like 70 million or something. At that time, I think there was one kind of big musical with Julie Andrews that they spent a lot of money on, and it made no money whatsoever. And it ended up that there was a power struggle between the president of Fox, a guy called Darryl F. Zanuck, who was the big kind of mogul, and his son, who was Richard Zanuck, who produced the original Planet of the Apes and produced this one, and would also go on to form the production company Zanuck Brown, which you will know from watching Jaws as one of the first credits in the film. And what happened was, while this was going on, his dad, Darryl Zanuck, fired his son, just to get rid of a power struggle. So because this was his son's last project, he just said, fuck it. blow it all up,
Right.
blow the planet up.
Yeah. I'm looking for the film you were on about. You mentioned Julie Andrews, but I was looking
it's
at.
called Star.
I'm looking right at it, but I went in the wrong direction first. But actually, there isn't. It's sort of not wrong because I went to Hello Dolly because I couldn't remember who starred in it. I knew Michael Crawford was in it, but that's a Fox film that took 26 million off a 25 million budget, so effectively that lost money as well.
Yeah, and
so and that was the year before this, or the same year, one of the two. Sorry, I think they were both 68, 69, and then this is 70. Funnily enough, Star was directed by Robert Wise, Star Trek: The Motion Picture.
Oh wow, yeah, because they also did. I think it came after Beneath Planet Apes, but they made Tora, which is a big film where they tried to do the attack on Pearl Harbor, and they kind of had it from both sides, almost of the sides. So you had like people like Joseph Cotton and Jason Robards, and then you had a lot of kind of famous Japanese actors and actresses as well, like Tatsuya Mahashi, who was in some Kurosawa films, and same with pronunciation is within the others, but Ijiro Tono, and it was directed by Richard Fleischer, who had done a bunch of films like 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, and he did Fantastic Voyage as well, and Soylent Green with Charlton Heston, and also some of the Japanese stuff was directed by Kinji Fukasaku, who was a really massively famous Japanese director who did the series of Yakuza films called Battles Without Honor and Humanity, and he directed Battle Royale as well.
Battles Without Honor and Humanity, the most well-known bit of music,
exactly.
Kill Bill, trailer for Kill Bill 1, and a piece of music every single person listening to this knows.
Yes, exactly. And that film had a 25 million budget, and it only made 37 million.
Which is a loss. It is a loss because you got to remember marketing budgets,
exactly,
cinema cuts and everything. And bear in mind, pre Star Wars, cinema cuts were probably higher, probably closer to 50%. Now with the behemoth of franchises we've got, they can drive ridiculous bargains like this many screens and you only get a tiny percentage for the first 8 weeks and all that nonsense.
Exactly.
Back then, half of it, I think it's about 45% went to cinemas, and then you've got to factor in the marketing budget. So if you're taking 150% of your budget, if you like, you're losing money.
Yeah.
Now, a bit more complicated, because bear in mind, no home market either at this point. Now, I know the bottom's fallen out of DVDs now, but there are streaming deals and all the rest of it. But the point is, back then, it showed theatrically, that was it. That film lost money, no doubt.
Yeah. And I mean, and again, luckily, Planet of the Apes was kind of consistently making money.
And as we see, they're about to cut their cloth.
Yeah.
And actually, it's the best thing the series could have done.
Definitely. Yeah.
But we'll talk more about that next week. Final thoughts on it from me. I really don't want to add a lot because I've said, I've talked plenty, but I've also said a lot less as we've gone through than some films we talk about because there's not really much here. The last 25 minutes is interesting, but it's interesting relative to a boring first hour, and it still introduces characters that are dead within minutes. It's all over fairly quickly. You can infer a lot of interesting themes about the preemptive strike, the role of religion, separation of church and state, all of those things. But they may not have meant it. It might just have bled in a little bit from its era. Feels like a bit of a rushed cash in, to be honest with you. Nothing wrong with that. It's okay. We've covered worse. We've covered a lot worse. Its biggest crime is it's really boring. And it feels a bit TV. But I think a lot of that is because it's a rehash with a budget Charlton Heston stand-in, which is exactly what TV used to do back in the day. They sort of retell the story with different people playing the cast. So Not a highlight. It's not going to be a highlight of the series. I dare say it's either the second or the third worst film we'll cover in the entire thing. But it could have been a lot worse. The only problem is once it gets interesting, I've checked out. So it's got interesting, but I'm not really paying that much attention. So that's it from me. Becca?
Dear idea. Yeah, I do feel a little bit bad for panning this in terms of its sort of critique or lack thereof. But yeah, I think this film kind of really gets going and towards its sort of latter stages, really. Just kind of ramps up. Like the first part of it is just kind of like a retread of the first film, and it's just a shame that James Franciscus, I can't say his name, Franciscus, call him Franciscan Friar, but that's not his name.
I got off quite light with Bond. I mean, it doesn't take me long to sign my name or anything.
No, it's quite nice and easy, isn't it?
I've got one of these names I have to spell for fucking everybody.
Really?
You know, I don't. No, I'm saying I don't.
I spell mine for everybody.
Yeah.
And even when I pronounce mine, they still pronounce it. I say it's Brigden. They still say, "Oh, Bridgeton."
No.
No.
GD.
Yeah.
Damn it.
Exactly.
I'm just used to it. It's automatically whenever I give my name out to whoever, even when it doesn't matter, I always have to say BYRNA. Just because
That's one of those things, isn't it? It's like with my name, it's like, it's like 1B, 2 C's, no KH, no this, no that, no the other. But yeah, sorry, I mispronounced the name, I do apologise. Anyway, James Franciscus, there we go. Yeah, it's a shame that he may have been a great TV actor. I'm sorry to say this is probably the first and only film I've seen him in. But yeah, does like a little bit of charisma, definitely. But yeah, this film for me kind of does get going towards the end, really, when it does the subplot. Obviously, they sort of reveal the secret beneath the planet, and then you do get all these amazing commentaries as Charlie's gone through on sort of nuclear war and church state, things like that, for example. For me, I think, which is a real shame. But yeah, that's just kind of my view. It is quite plodding and rather dull, unfortunately, until the latter section of the film. So, but looking forward to, as I say, watching the series as a whole, and maybe watching it in more of a context rather than just kind of singling it out. Chris.
Yeah, it kind of like, I kind of admire where it just kind of goes for it and just, throws everything and just see what sticks. But it is a bit of a mess. I kind of feel like, it's a bit chaotic, and everything feels a bit too rushed, and it just kind of like, well, I suppose the end says it all. It's like everyone dies. The end. Like, right, done. But as Dave says, there's worse films. There's still stuff of interest. I wasn't bored by it. It's
well done. I was.
No, generally it wasn't. I wasn't bored by it, and I think also it's like, well, at least it's 90 minutes. At least if you are bored by it, you're not bored for that long. Because other films do tend to drag on. So, but yeah, I'm excited for the next part of my Apes journey.
Oh, it's gonna get way better. Promise. Charlie.
Yeah, I mean, I have, having seen it multiple times before, I kind of have the luxury of knowing that bit of the end is kind of the best bit. So I, again, like I said earlier, I kind of did other stuff while the boring bits were going on. I mean, you
don't miss anything. You really don't. Yeah.
A lot of the retread is really dull, and because they've almost tried to repeat Charlton Heston's character as well. So you've got Franciscus, again, because Nova can't talk, you've got Franciscus doing his inner monologue constantly, and it's so flat because he's got no presence. Say what you want about Charlton Heston, but the man had presence and the man had charisma, and this guy certainly had nearer. This guy sadly had neither at this time. So it all becomes flat. But
yeah, Nova.
As
joke.
but as soon as you get to the Forbidden Zone and all the mutant stuff, it just turns almost into a different film. And the ending still kind of has an aspect of shock for me. It just the way it's done, it just feels that way. And so yeah, it's whether you can justify 2/3 of the film being really, really boring for a last act that is actually interesting and fun, and somewhat thought-provoking. Whereas, and I think I probably can. Whereas, while it is boring, Battle is much more of a kind of a more poorly made film, I think. And it's very jokey, and it's funny as well, where it shouldn't be.
Yeah.
So while Battle's probably a more entertaining film, I'd probably say Beneath is still a better film.
I've
but
only
not very
seen
much.
Battle once, and I think it lost me fairly early. So I think I think I might have granted agreement when you said it's a funnier film, and it's like that's not how I remember it. But then the tone of the third and fourth film tells me it must be, so I just need to watch it again.
Yeah, I mean, there's stuff I remember with the. I think the general's name in it is Urko, and he's hilarious.
Right.
And because the kind of, again, because it's much smaller, and it's much smaller there, because of what's obviously, without going into what happens next week and the week after, everything gets much smaller again, and you're back to a period where the massive ape cities aren't there yet, so everything's like kind of little villages settling.
Yeah.
So it's a bit like Neighbours or Home and Away.
I'm sold.
Something I thought I'd never hear.
Oh, Becca, such a philistine! You've not even picked up on the similarity of the Planet of the Apes series to Neighbours and Home and Away.
Shocking, positively
Yeah.
shocking.
Although
It's almost like you're not paying attention at all.
Well, yeah, we know they belong together.
Yeah,
Forever and ever.
he's just quoted the lyrics from Home and Away.
Oh, okay.
I imagine. I mean, not that I
Yeah.
would have ever seen that.
Well, not.
I mean, you know, just be grateful I didn't sing it.
There is one thing though that this film, I can't remember hearing it in the original film, but the idea that ape does not kill ape,
Right.
which is mentioned when Dr. Zaius says to Ursus when there's the big illusion, and he says you should put them out of their misery.
It doesn't make sense really though, because although it's an idea that sort of delineates that society from ours, I just couldn't see any society, where that would be the case, because you're always going to get crimes of passion and that sort of thing.
Oh yeah, I know, but I mean but it's still that's where I believe the introduction was, and it's something that even goes on in the new films.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, I don't think.
No, I understand what you're saying.
I'm not saying I think it's particularly a problem, and I think it's an interesting wrinkle to throw on, but it's a difficult concept to throw any weight behind as that would stick.
Yeah.
And we get to that when we get to something like War. I think it's in War, Planet of the Apes, with Cobra and stuff.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah. So, but I'm not sure I know enough about the film.
Well, if Charlie doesn't know much about the film, then I don't see how much of a chance me and Dave has.
We would need.
We're all doomed, quite
We
frankly.
would need a very, very specialist. Well, a fact specialist, Chris. Someone who.
Even more specialist than Charlie. I don't think there is such a
Well,
person.
someone who's-
Charlie's got niche expertise. What we need is someone who masters the whole fact industry as a whole.
Yeah, so someone who not necessarily knows much about Planet of the Apes, but knows facts.
But whatever the series, we know that they go and find what's necessary. I think that's what we need. when I say need, I think only because it's in the format, because I don't really care when it comes to this film. But anyway, I think
you need to change the format, really, to be
there's
honest.
only one person I've ever met that's up to this job, Chris.
Who's that?
Well, thankfully, she's on the call with us. It's Becca.
I need to pass the shoe.
And we'll throw it, and we'll lob it back at you, because
Just lob it back.
we couldn't be asked to read shit on this.
I did kind of struggle. I thought, right, I'll go and look elsewhere, and I won't just find boring facts on IMDb. No, I struggled. A lot of these have come from Charlie's immense brain and knowledge, so it's all good. So some fun facts that I managed to find out about this film. As Charlie mentioned, obviously this is a new film in the series, the original series, not to feature Roddy McDowall, who was busy working on his the only film that he ever directed. And fun fact number 2, obviously, as Charlie also mentioned, this is the first film in the original series that doesn't mention the 20th Century Fox logo at the start, which is a pattern for the rest of the original series. Fun fact number 3, not mentioned by Charlie, Orson Welles was offered the role of Ursus but declined, as was Ernest Borgnine, apparently. That would have been interesting.
It's amazing, because Orson Welles would do any old shit for money.
Yeah, I'm quite surprised that he didn't do this, considering the actor who played Ursus. I thought it was like John Wayne or somebody.
I think they want to do the music, the makeup.
Fair enough.
Incredible. Also considered for the role of not David Brent was Burt Reynolds. Apparently, that would have been an altogether different film had he taken on the lead role.
That might have been... Yeah, okay. That might have made this film stand out a little bit more, because he's different physical type for a start.
Exactly. Yeah, it was more it would have been perhaps more of a star vehicle, I guess. But he just brings a completely different presence away from Charlton Heston, which is quite interesting. Fun fact number 4, this film sees the first appearance of Natalie Trendy, aka Mrs. Arthur P. Jacobs. And she's quite notable in that she plays all 3 groups in the series. So she plays a mutant in Beneath the Planet of the Apes, a human in Escape from the Planet of the Apes, and an ape in Conquest of the Planet of the Apes. And her and Norman Burton are the only 2 actors to have played both human and ape characters in the original series. Another fun fact number 5, again from the brain of Charlie, in connection to the series that we previously covered, Victor Buono, who here plays a character called Fat Man, which I think is really harsh. He plays a member of the Mutant Council, also played King Tut in the 1966 Batman movie.
Norman Burton's also the only man I can think of who's ever retrieved diamonds from the anus of a corpse.
Elementary, Felix.
Yeah. Well, that's...
He'll forever, whatever other films, TV that he's done, he'll always be Felix in Diamonds Are Forever.
Yeah, one of the weaker Felixes, but there you go. Not really his fault, won't give it a lot to do. Yeah, that was more fun than the film, folks.
That was fun, folks.
Right, okay, as for social media, you can find me at the Pasty Kid 1976 on Twitter.
You can find me on Twitter on Cinematronics. You can also find all the old episodes at cinematronics.co.uk.
You can find me at Films on Wax on Twitter.
And you can find us at Do You Expect Us to Talk on Twitter. You can also find us on Facebook and YouTube and Apple Podcast, Spotify, Stitcher and Podbean, and wherever else you enjoy your podcasts. Don't forget to rate us, review us, to like us and share us. Thank you very much.
Share us around like a bunch of dirty bitches.
But be gentle,
abuse
please.
us, but be gentle. And give us, make us a cup of tea afterwards as well.
Yeah, don't forget.
Yeah.
And give us a like. Thank you very much.
Or just give us a like. Save yourself a bit of energy. I think we should go lower budget and more comedic, Becca. What do you reckon?
I agree. Do You Expect Us to Talk will return with Escape from the Planet of the Apes.